Good morning. Today is Kaf Beis Shvat, the 22nd day of Shvat. It's the yortzeit of the Kotzker Rebbe and the Lubavitcher Rebbe's wife, Chaya Mushka, the Rebbitzin. And it is also the 13th of February. And we're holding in the same essay that we started last week by Parshas Jethro, the portion of Jethro, because we want to finish this essay. And the last thing we saw on Friday was the parable of the candle refigured with a whole new explanation. That the wick is the divine soul, the oil is the animal soul, the light, the flame on the wick is the love that the divine soul has for God. And the incredible thing that he now said is that the brightness of the flame and the quality of the flame, whether it flickers or whether it's constant, depends on the oil, meaning it depends on the animal soul. So we're on page 76. Correct. So at the very beginning, ובגילוי האהבה ויראה שנולד מהתבוננות מתגבר על השכלת הנפש בהמית עד שגם שכל ומידות הנפש הבאים נמשכים אחרי הנפש אלוקית. And we saw that the whole purpose of meditating, of contemplating, yesh me'ayin, which means that creation comes out of nothingness, meaning out of what we cannot fathom, what we cannot understand. And by the way, in other places it says that this is the sphere of wisdom. Right? The more wisdom you have, meaning the more selfless you have, the more you can contemplate something coming out of nothing. Now, one of the reasons for that is, as it's explained in profusely in other places, is that the more selflessness a person has, the more he doesn't feel that something is his, the more he sees new things coming into his mind. Let me give you an example. Let's say you learn a daf of Talmud, a folio of Gemara. It happens to some people once in a while. And you learned it and you understand it. And then you feel that you have this worked out in your head. And then you come and you sit and you come and say, whatever I understood, to have selflessness means to feel that, first of all, this is not mine. God taught me this. But more importantly, to nullify yourself, because selflessness, bittul, also means self-nullification. I will nullify my understanding here. Meaning I'm willing to completely erase it, as it were. To come and open myself up and say, Hashem, teach me something new. The more you have the capacity to do this, to nullify your previous understanding, which is very hard for people, because whatever a person understands, he's set in his ways. He feels that that's his accomplishment. He understands this. This is his take on the world. So
that's why you have to learn it 101 times.
Right, and every time that you learn it, right,
you're improving what you know.
Well, improving is saying that you're building on what you already had. Here the idea is that I nullify myself completely. It's as if I don't have any understanding at all. And I say to Hashem, teach me again. Teach me a new way. And what happens is that you actually experience something out of nothing. You experience how suddenly your mind is filled with a new idea that you've never seen. That is the most clear and accessible example that people have in their daily lives of something out of nothing. Where do these ideas come from? Where did it just show up from? So we say it comes from the crown.
Suddenly remember something which you didn't know about, you didn't think about.
That's something else.
Suddenly it pops into your mind. It was very important.
That's remembering, but that's like I had something. So it's also related to wisdom, but not as much. What is really phenomenal and worthy of mention, noteworthy, is this idea that sometimes this happens to people. When does this happen to them? In the shower. Because in the shower they have this peace of mind that they suddenly clear themselves of any thoughts about themselves. They just enjoy the running water and they lose touch with exactly who they are, what they are, and suddenly great ideas come in. Because this is the example of something from nothing. In any case, getting back to here, so the more the divine soul has wisdom, has selflessness and self-nullification, the more it can change the way of thinking of the intellect of the animal soul. which we said the intellect of the animal soul is always something from something. It wants to see a chain of cause and effect all the time. This whole thing of cause and effect is very important. You can't live in the world without it, but you also have to understand its limitations, and that's the same as the limitations of the animal soul. You wanted to say something?
No.
Okay. So when this happens, and the animal soul its way of thinking, its intellect is canceled, as it were, and it's suddenly it's standing there. So what do we do now? Then it's drawn after the divine soul. Then it's drawn after the way of thinking that there's something from nothing and not something from something, not a chain of causality, but rather new creation at every moment. But he says here, it's very important that the feeling of something from nothing translate into emotion, love and fear of God. That's what he says. There has to be a flame there. There's no flame there, then the oil coming up the wick is not going to do anything at all. There has to be a flame. There has to be a translation of this way of understanding, this way of seeing the world into some kind of character trait. And the character trait is loving God, being in awe of God. And then that begets רוח הייתי רוח והמשיך רוח שנמשך תוספת אור והנפש הרבה יותר כמו שהיה מתחילה מצד נפש אלוקים מצד עצמו. And then this causes the drawing down of more spirit. In this case, a better flame, or a greater flame, a cleaner flame, a brighter flame. So it's not the oil per se. It's what he's saying here is that it's a very interesting picture. It's like that the oil being drawn up the wick, that's what causes the flame to be greater. We think about it as the oil, the wick is now filled with the oil, and it's the oil burning in a certain way that creates the flame in a certain way, that gives it certain character qualities. Here he's saying it's not, you don't need to go that far. It's just the very fact that it's drawn after it. The animal soul is now rising. That rising is called the awakening from below, and that causes an awakening from above. Again, it doesn't mean that the physical description that we have is wrong. He's not challenging the physical description, which says it's the oil burning. But he's looking at it from the spiritual perspective, and what's important in the spiritual perspective is not the oil, but rather the fact that the oil is being drawn up. It's causing what we call an awakening from below. And this is what we mean when we say the benefit or the superiority of light that comes out of darkness. Because the light, meaning the love and fear of the divine soul, is improved thanks to the darkness, meaning the being drawn by being able to draw up the animal soul. And again, this is not an intellectual, it's not just an intellectual exercise. He's saying a person has to feel that his very reason for existing physically, which usually is governed by the animal soul, which says, I eat in order to have pleasure, to sustain myself, whatever. All these things, these feelings, these character traits, they're drawn after godliness. And he says, now I want to eat in order to reach a higher spiritual level. Okay, so we're going to skip until chapter 4. והנה כמו שיתרון דנפש אלוקית הוא מן החושר נפש דווקא כנ"ל, כמו כן יובן מה שכתוב שיש יתרון לחוכמה, רוצה לומר לחוכמה העליונה מן השכלות דווקא. בחוכמה זו היא בחינת חוכמת התורה דאורייתא מחוכמה נפק. So now he says, just as we said this, now it's very interesting. Now he's going from the psychology out into reality. So he says in psychology was your divine soul. What?
Psychology. Reality.
Well, it's your internal reality. Now we're going out to the external reality. Or not even to the external reality per se. We're going into what we would call epistemology, into knowledge, into the study of knowledge. It says just as this is true in a person's inner psychology, this is also true epistemologically. And what does that mean? That just as there is benefit to the burning or the character revealed by the divine soul when the animal soul joins it, the same is true of the wisdom of the Torah. That the wisdom of the Torah, what is it? It's like the divine soul. We keep saying this. The divine soul lives off of Torah. If you don't feed a Torah, there's no divine soul. It's weak. It's fatigued. It's famished. So the wisdom of the Torah is benefited, just like the divine soul, from the mundane wisdoms. What are the mundane wisdoms? What mankind developed from observing the world. What we call out of experience. The empirical method is really what we call, there is no one who is wise as he who has experience. Right. Empiricism means I'm going to look at experience to define my knowledge. I'm not going to speculate like Aristotle, who only speculated. I'm going to come and say, my knowledge depends on actual experience.
Why Aristotle didn't have any experience?
He had some, but it wasn't his method. He didn't rely purely on experience. He relied on his syllogisms, on his logical conclusions. If he came to a logical conclusion, and by the way, the Rambam is the same way. Maimonides is exactly the same way. He doesn't rely on experience, which makes you wonder what kind of a doctor is he. Right? We have this thing called evidence-based medicine. Why? Because it's a huge thing now, because medicine until the 50s and 60s was still based on philosophy. I mean, they knew there was such a thing called empiricism. They had heard about it, but they didn't think that it was exclusive. They thought there were other options, and some of them were philosophical. And they needed a lot of thinking first before trying an experiment. It's all true, it's all good. But empiricism is the pure understanding that I can only rely on that which I have experience, direct experience of. And so, the mundane wisdoms are based on empiricism. We're not getting into the question whether they're exclusively empiricist or not, but in principle, this is what we call, there is no one who is wise like he who has experience. But the divine wisdom, the Torah wisdom, is what we call, there is no one who is wise but he who sees the future, or sees that which is coming into being. Why? Because we said this is yesh me'ayin. This is the understanding that something out of nothing is coming. So tomorrow we'll continue, because you have to go, and we'll see how this plays out, not just in the psychological realm, but in what we call the epistemological realm.
Tomorrow we'll start on time.